finally, after like 2-3 months, I can actually look up and see if I'm in frame or not. So I don't end up swiveling like this. Kinda useful, you know? Kinda useful. Not a bad thing to have. Kinda convenient. You know, I was more than a little surprised by this one. Not because it's amazing or terrible, but because of how many different things it made me feel. And how often those feelings changed over the course of 90 minutes. And I ended up taking a lot of notes for this one, which is kinda odd considering how average it was. But that's the thing, I really hesitate to even call it average, or bland, or unremarkable. It really is kind of a bizarre movie to me. Or rather, my reaction to it is at the very least unusual. Because around an hour into this thing, I wrote down the definition of a passable movie. And I stand by that to a certain degree. But something also happened in that last half hour. This thing kinda won me over, and I'm not sure why, but I feel I was tricked, like it manipulated me into liking it. But isn't that exactly what movies do? They manipulate you and trick you into feeling certain things. But I really didn't want to like this, and up until the last half hour I really didn't. Because there are so many issues with it that just annoyed me all the way through. And then it did something, and hijacked my brain, and made me like it. And some of the dumbest things are in that last part. Things I really didn't like. But when the credits rolled, I was smiling and feeling all warm and fuzzy. And I think the problem is that it didn't earn the right to make me feel that way. It didn't take the time to build up a compelling story with compelling characters. It just hit the right emotional buttons that it knew would make me feel good. And that's a pretty cheap trick to pull. And in a way, that made me dislike it even more. That being said, I didn't actively dislike it while watching it. I was annoyed by a few things. A lot of things. I thought some things weren't done that well. But there are things I liked about it. And as a whole, it was just kinda passable, at least on a technical level. So it's a movie about a hunter-gatherer society living in North America 20,000 years ago. And one of the things that interested me in this is that there's not a lot of these movies around. The last big one was 10,000 BC, from like 10 years ago, and that wasn't exactly great. Now this one's a little different, because as it turns out, it's actually about the domestication of wolves, you know, that eventually turned into dogs. And that right there is probably my biggest issue with the movie, because it pretends it happened in like a few months with one wolf, which it obviously didn't. A wolf didn't just suddenly turn into a modern dog. Now you could say that, hey, it's a kids movie, which it definitely kinda feels like. To which I have to say, are kids supposed to read subtitles? Because this whole thing is in some weird language. Maybe some Native American language? Or made up? I don't know. What I do know is, kids aren't gonna understand a word they're saying. But yeah, they'll probably still get the gist of it, because there's not really that much dialogue anyway. However, the fact that it's a kids movie actually makes it even worse, because now you're teaching kids pretty significant scientific and historical inaccuracies. Now you could say that kids shouldn't get their information from movies anyway, but that's the point, they could. But instead of fact-checking and bothering to make things accurate, they just do whatever they want with this thing. And the wolf thing is not the only inaccuracy. First of all, yeah, hyenas existed in North America at one point. But not 20,000 years ago, which you specified. Actually close to 1,000,000 years ago. So you're off by quite a bit there. And what about the stars that were supposed to guide him home? Well, following a certain constellation over the course of several months is actually a pretty bad idea, because the night sky changes and the constellations move. So you're gonna end up in the wrong place. And those are just some of the things my dumbass noticed. So they obviously didn't care about attention to detail or being factual. Now on a technical level, this one is also equally weird. It has this highly stylized look, and it blends CGI with live action in a pretty interesting way actually. But a lot of CGI is pretty terrible, especially the animals, which tells me the budget was an issue. And I think this is a classic case of having more ambition than budget. So they sort of chose to embrace that and incorporate it into the style. And it kind of worked. because some of the stuff in this is actually pretty stunning. It's not a poorly directed or shot movie at all, but the lack of budget really shows. And overall, at least for the first hour, the story barely held my interest. It towed a very fine line, doing just enough to keep me paying attention. Like I was verging on boredom almost the entire time. But I also wouldn't say I was actually bored at any point. So yeah, this is an odd one, and I'm not sure what to make of it. But it's definitely not a great movie. But I wouldn't call it terrible either. But would I recommend it? Not really, to be honest. I mean, I guess it's a fine family movie, if the kids don't mind subtitles. But that's about it. So probably skip this one, or don't. I'm not your alpha daddy.